put them, on the screen at various times throughout this day.
Okay.
Because blood collection, very important. Diane.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've put up that 1-800 number for you as well, Mary, and we'll continue to put that up this afternoon. So good luck to you, Mary, and to anyone who's listening right now, if you can donate blood, it is very much needed. Obviously, we're still looking at the scene here in Manhattan, Lower Manhattan, so much smoke. We want to go now to a firefighter who was on the scene and hear what he has to say.
I saw people originally coming out the window, and I was, at that time, I was quite upset about it, that I thought we should get in there. But then the explosion on the South World Trade happened, and I said, this is something we have to do, we have to back out. We backed out over here, and even then, that's when I was caught again in the second explosion.
Yeah, I went up to the elevator, the 24th floor. As soon as we get up there, the elevator get out. Power, we lost power in the elevator. Thank God we kept one of the truck guys there, and he forced the door, and then we worked our way down the stairs. As we came downstairs, we were just dragging people along with us, and then when we came outside, it just blew, the tower blew, and I found a mask on the floor as I was crawling.
Amazing sound from a firefighter who was on the scene. We have been on the air now for several hours, since 9 o'clock this morning, covering this event, and we obviously still do not know the extent of the injuries, of the casualties. We can only guess that they are quite massive, and I know there is great relief to those who see any family, any friends on our air who are okay, and as we can get information about numbers to call, about what you can do, we will be bringing that information to you as quickly as possible. You're looking at a live picture from Newscopter 7 right now, and of course you can see that there is fire in adjacent buildings. There is problems, serious problems still in that area down in Lower Manhattan.
A story that just crossed the wire, and one we haven't talked about in the last hour or so. International airlines had to scramble to divert or cancel flights going to the United States. Undoubtedly, there are people in our audience today who were going to JFK Airport to pick up friends, loved ones, business associates, and those people couldn't land here. A couple of hours ago, Canada said, if you like, you can use any and all of our airports here because we feel that they are safe. The cancellations and diversions caused confusion and congestion, not only at airports in this country, but at many European airlines, where airlines ordered flights bound for the United States to do U-turns or to find alternative landing points outside of America. Some airlines reversed course only after being denied permission to land by the FAA, which ordered the U.S. airspace. And this is all across the country. They sterilized the airspace over the entire United States. European airlines, American airlines, sorting out how they're going to get these people home. All I can tell the folks at home is that as we go throughout this day, we will be efforting information to find out about the people on those planes, where they are, whether they're in Canada, which planes were diverted back to their original points of origin. As we get information on this, we will share it with you.
Absolutely. We have Celeste Ford, who is at JFK Airport right now for us. Celeste, give us an idea of what's going on there right now.
We're told that all air travel nationwide is still suspended, and we do not have a sense from the Federal Aviation Administration as to when air travel will be allowed to resume. That also includes international flights. They will not be landing. The skies remain frozen. This has caused huge delays for an untold number of air travelers, including those here at Kennedy Airport. We were at LaGuardia Airport earlier. Perhaps behind me you can see that we have a brown van and a white van there. They were just loaded up with luggage and passengers. The airlines here are trying to accommodate them by taking them to nearby hotels, making arrangements for them, phone calls, food. Nationwide, this is going on. And it's been a difficult situation, especially at LaGuardia earlier, when they evacuated the terminals because they were concerned over the terrorist threat. Thousands of people were forced to stand outside on the access ramps that run through the airport. They couldn't use their cell phones because the service has been so limited. And even if you could get to a pay phone or a hard line to try to call home or make arrangements, because of the call volume, you couldn't get through to anyone. So it's been a very difficult time. I was somewhat taken aback when I went over to the Port Authority police headquarters at LaGuardia Airport, and an officer there told me that they had no phone service and they were relying on their radios.
Police officer told everybody to form a human chain, and we held on to each other, and he flashed the light, and he directed us to Building 5, and we went out Building 5.
Did you see people bleeding, and what did you see?
Oh, everybody could see. Do you want blood? Here's blood. Everybody's bleeding. People are laying all over the floor. It's horrible. And I was there the first time, and this is twice.
One man said he was walking by and saw bodies laying as he was trying to walk out of the World Trade Center. And when this happened, people were so desperate, such times of desperation, that moment, one girl bleeding with dust all over her, bleeding from head to toe, ran into our live van to take cover. Police walking by now with water and masks, trying to give them to as many as people as they can, because again, it is hard to breathe out here at times. And you can see just in the past couple of moments here, as we've been on the air live from Lower Manhattan, the smoke has gotten even more dark, which means police are still battling this blaze, and we understand Secret Service and military officials are here now going through the debris, trying to find fatalities, injuries, trying to find exactly where the impact was on the World Trade Center. Back to you.
Jeff, we
it appears that there was more smoke. Is that your take on it as well?
Yeah, in fact, I can show you now. I mean, we were able to look straight down this street, and we actually had a perfect view of what was that tower. But now you can't see much. It's almost like the smoke will come in waves. Right now we're in a very heavy wave right now. But it did clear for a while. Now it seems to be back in full effect.
Okay, and wind down there, because I'm trying to look at the shot as you take it up. Is there wind or no wind down there, and how is that impacting the smoke and the dust?
A little bit of wind, but not much. I mean, you know, I'm trying to give you an idea. Let's go a shot at some of the papers just to show the kind of wind we're talking about. It's not much, 5 miles per hour at most. Wind doesn't appear to be a huge factor right now.
People who are working in the newsroom trying to gather information. Obviously, on the set, as soon as we get that information, we will be bringing that to you as quickly as possible. Bill?
Diana, we want to go to Lori Stokes, who's been updating our information from the newsroom. She's at the flash cam for us. Lori, you have the immediate closures and openings and transportation issues for the city of New York, right?
I do, Bill. Also, I have some information on the judicial front as far as the New York State goes. I have information now that all state courts will be closed in about 2 minutes as of 2 o'clock. Apparently, every state courthouse in New York will be closed at 2. That is according to the Office of Court Administration. Now, as you mentioned, on the transportation front, a very significant news item to bring you that all bridges now are open going out of New York. That's important that you know that it's only out of New York. Also, Manhattan Bridge at 59th Street Bridge open only going east. Nothing else coming in. Once again, also, Metro North is offering limited service out of Grand Central, again, only out of the city. Now, in Newark, in New Jersey Transit has restored extremely limited train service on the Northeast Corridor line between Newark and Trenton. Also, on the North Jersey coastline between Newark and Bayhead, and the Raritan Valley line that's between Newark and High Bridge. All trains out of New York remain suspended. Hudson Bergen Light Rail is running only south Marion Boulevard, and also bus service is running throughout New Jersey, but not into or out of New York City. However, access link service for the disabled is also suspended. But probably the most major news to come out of this, at least at this moment at 1:59, as far as we've been talking about the bridge closures, is that the bridges are open going out of the city. Bill and Diana, back to you.
Okay, and that's very important, Lori, to note. The bridges are open and going out.
Outbound.
Don't be coming into the city. They don't want you in the city right now. Only emergency personnel are needed in the city. I want everyone to take a look right now at the screen because we do have some home video that was shot of this incident. Let's take a look if we can and roll that home video so you can see what happened earlier today.
That was the second tower that you saw. The first one had already been attacked. The second tower with a jumbo jet, and there have been so many conflicting reports. We have been reporting earlier that it was a commuter plane that attacked the first one. We are now getting reports that it may have been a 767 that attacked the first one, and also, of course, the jumbo jet that ran into the second one. And that would explain this missing plane that has crashed. If we have perhaps four planes accounted for. One was not a commuter jet.
This home video is on the other side of the river. Yeah.
No, is this from the Hudson?
New Jersey side, Jim?
It looks like it's either from Staten Island or from New Jersey.
Staten Island, New Jersey. Okay, these are home video pictures that you're looking at. As you're looking at these, I want to mention that right now we've been joined on this set by Jose Sanchez. And Jose was on his way to school this morning. He goes to school at BMCC. He also works here in our studios and has just gotten back from that area because, Jose, you were down there when this happened. Tell us what you saw.
Well, I was on my way to school, and then I hear a plane coming down, and I turned around, and all I saw was the big explosion into the first building. And I thought it was just an accident, so I went into class, had class about 20 minutes, then the teacher said a second plane hit the other building, so then they evacuated the whole school, and like a whole bunch, about like 500 students were all outside. We saw the fire. We saw about 20, 25 people just jump off.
How far away is BMCC from the World Trade Center?
Probably maybe about a mile, less than that, 15 blocks.
You heard the impact of the second one?
Yeah, you could hear it. It was loud.
Did you feel it?
Like the first time when I walked in, I didn't feel it, but I jumped because you can tell. And when we were all outside, all we was looking at older people falling, and then the first building collapsed. Everyone was scared, so then we ran down, left through the back entrance. We were looking at a street about maybe, now we're like 25 blocks away. No cell phones were working, trying to call people, nothing happened. Then I saw the other building collapse all the way to the ground, and the smoke started to come there. I said we just all ran looking for a train.
You said you saw people fall?
Yeah, no, jump.
Jump?
Like 20 to 25 people. Because the heat was too much.
How far up were they?
Like, a lot.
Oh, gosh.
How did you get back uptown?
Walked.
I walked all the way from
none of the trains. I would look for 34th Street, 28th Street, 50th Street, 42nd. None of the trains worked. None of the buses worked.
Jose, what was going through your mind when you saw this? Did you have any idea what was happening?
Honestly, to me, it looked like another world war, like the Hiroshima bomb or something like that.
Well, did you think that's what it was, or did you know at that point that
I didn't know. I was hoping it's not a war, but the way things are happening, like I heard on the radio, the Pentagon and everything, it sounds like it's heading to that.
What exactly did your teacher tell you, Jose?
The teacher he left the middle class, went to get some information. He said that the second airplane hit the second building. And when he told me that, I was like, I don't know, that sounds like an accident. So they evacuated the whole building.
And how were the kids reacting? How were your classmates reacting?
A lot of them were just crying and everything, and just trying to call their parents and make sure that the ones that worked there, that they didn't die or anything.
You've called your parents?
Yeah.
They know you're okay before they're watching you on television?
Yeah,
right?
Even my mom works down there, called to make sure that she was safe.
And she's okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
What are your thoughts as you see these pictures of what happened this morning, Jose?
Terrible. I don't even know what to say about it. When I saw the first building collapse, I was in shock. I couldn't even say anything. It's unbelievable.
You all right?
Yeah, I'm all right.
How old are you?
18.
Okay. Jose Sanchez, a student in Lower Manhattan and a part-time worker here at WABC on the weekends. Thanks, Jose.
All right, thank you.
Well, I think we should probably recap at this point, don't you, Jim, a little bit about the timeline of what happened this morning. This morning at 9 o'clock, a plane struck the World Trade Center. And Jim, you have been keeping up with this timeline and kind of been able to put this into better words. Why don't you go through what happened for us this morning, and maybe we can roll some more tape of this incident.
Well, Diana, everything changed at 8:50 this morning. The first plane, American Airlines Flight 11.
Something that perhaps 30 or 40 can do. It is possible that only one major cell of some terrorist organization is involved. But I think we also have to ask another question now, and that is whether some state that hosted this movement knew about it and assisted, because there are elements of sophistication which raise that prospect.
Stay with us for a second, Tony, because Vince Cannistraro, who also talks on the subject of terrorism and does more than talk on the subject of terrorism for us, is also here at the moment. Vince, do you want to make some comments about this?
Yeah, Peter, I think that Tony makes some good points about the complexity and the sophistication of the operation. But I think also we have to see what kind of organizations in the past have been willing to do such a coordinated attack. And,
why is that a clue?
Because it's a pattern. We see people who committed suicide in these operations. So that points us away from a secular organization to a religiously oriented group. We've seen a pattern of planning against 5 U.S. airliners in 1993 with Ramzi Youssef when his safe site was inspected in Manila in 93. The FBI found evidence that he had been planning to hijack and blow up in flight 5 United airliners flying out of the Far East. Now, that was a very ambitious operation, and I don't think anyone believed that he could actually have done it. But here we are some 8 years later, and we see a coordinated operation and 3 planes hijacked and blown up against targets, obviously suicide operations, bringing a lot of other people with them. So that tends to point us towards a religiously organized group, perhaps towards Al-Qaeda, but again, with some state support. We've seen these groups evolve in their professionalism over the last several years. We go from...
Vince, can I just interrupt you for one second, just to try to keep you on the straight and narrow here? It may be a reach to blame. It may be a reach to blame a religious organization. I agree that we've come to accept the notion that some members, some people who worship Islam in the Middle East have found a better life giving themselves up, as we say. But aren't you sort of already directing and creating something of a mindset about an investigation that's more complicated than that?
Oh, certainly. And there's no question that this group, whatever it was, had some professional support, perhaps from a military and a state. The explosives, the way you would fly an aircraft. But it does point towards a group that has members who are willing to kill themselves in carrying out a punishing act against the United States. And there are only a few groups like that we know of. Secular radical Palestinian groups traditionally don't do this kind of thing.
Right.
We haven't seen that. The ones that we've seen that carried out suicide bombings tend to be Hamas, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Al-Qaeda, and of course Hezbollah. And so you've got basically a handful of potential suspects. None of this proves anything, of course, but it does tend to focus an investigation.
Let me ask you both, you, Vince, and then Tony Cordesman second. Just on the basis of history and on the basis of your own individual expertise, what do you think the chances are of the United States finding out who did this? First of all, you, Vince.
I think that there's a fairly good chance of finding out who did this because the people who did this are going to brag, they're going to talk, they're going to try and claim credit in a way that doesn't bring attention directly to them. But they will talk to other people, and some of our intelligence resources will pick this up, and that will lead us in a certain direction. And then they will go back to the database of threat warnings that they've had in the recent past. The U.S. has had a worldwide terrorism alert for some time that was just renewed yesterday, but again, the focus of those threats was abroad, U.S. installations abroad. They'll go back and see whether or not some of their intelligence operations that were picking up these threats may have been the recipient of deception. In other words, the group that may have done this may have been broadcasting deceptive information that we thought was legitimate threat information against a foreign installation while they were really planning to do this kind of an operation.
Thanks very much, Vince Canestrano. I'll go to Tony Cordesman right away, but I just want to remind people, if you watched the news yesterday, you noticed that you recall that we reported that a man named Ahmed Massoud, who was the last independent militia leader, not member of the Taliban in Afghanistan, was, we believe, killed. There's still some debate about whether he's dead or not, but certainly was attacked by his enemies, one of them disguised as a television cameraman. And the United States was very open to admit that what the United States lost when Massoud was killed yesterday was access into Afghanistan for U.S. intelligence operatives. And so I turn now to Tony Cordesman for a quick comment on how quickly, how easily, how complicated, how difficult, how impossible might it be to find out who did this?
Peter, let's consider several realities. We never found and punished the people who blew up the Marine Corps barracks.
In Beirut.
That's right. We have never really addressed who led the attack on Al-Khobar, and the people who've been punished were at the lowest possible level.
Those are the civilian and military barracks in Saudi Arabia.
That's right. And when we go back to Libya, and what happened to Pan Am 103, one person has been imprisoned. We have never gone beyond attacking low-level people in an incident of this magnitude to attack the leaders and the core of the group with success, but we have never before really encountered things so serious that we are on the edge of war.
And in the case of Pan Am 103, the United States alternated between blaming Syria for supporting the operation and or Libya, which supported the operation. So you're really reaffirming how complicated this is.
More than that, Peter, I think the key element is that if any state is involved in this in any way, if it knew this was going to happen or it shoulders a movement once we identify it, we find ourselves with issues about war and peace which we have never before encountered in terrorism.
Well, you certainly put your finger on one more part. I'd like you to hold that, Tony, for a second, because nothing could be more, in some respects, potentially dangerous at the moment. But let's not lose focus for today. We'll come back to Tony Cordesman and talk about American reaction to the rest of this world. But in the meantime, we have a disaster here in New York City, which is a national disaster, and we have a disaster in Washington because there's been an attack on the nation's military establishment. And we have at least one major plane crash in Pennsylvania today, which we believe is related, but in its own way is a national disaster, as the crash of a major airliner often is. And I want to go to, before we get carried away by theory on terrorism, no offense to my colleagues, let's go back to Lower Manhattan, where Bob Jameson is with George Stephanopoulos. And Bob has been visiting hospitals in the last little while, and so I think the two of you together can bring us up to date on the scene.
George, if I might, I'll start first because I've just returned from St. Vincent's Hospital, which, Peter, is a little more than a mile from the World Trade Center and is a principal destination today for those who were injured in this disaster. And as one measure of how large it is, by midday there were about 200 people, 18 of them critically injured, who were brought to St. Vincent's, which is about 20 more than were injured, than were brought to St. Vincent's after the World Trade Center bombing in 1993. The injuries that the doctors are reporting are not principally respiratory injuries, which was the case in 1993, but these are largely crushing injuries. And Peter, 5 hours after the first plane went into the World Trade Center, ambulances are still arriving regularly at St. Vincent's. They are conducting triage, classifying the degree of injury outside on the sidewalk in front of St. Vincent's, and they don't have a clear idea of how many more injured may go there, as well as the other hospitals in New York, and now we hear some in New Jersey.
And Peter, that's in part because we've just got a report from John McKenzie out in the field who talked to William Hull, the head of the Port Authority, who said that formal search and rescue operations haven't even begun yet. The bulk of the effort right now by the police and the fire department and others is simply to establish the integrity, the safety of the World Trade Center building. Second, what's left on the site of the World Trade Center. Secondly, Peter, they reported that there's a staggering number of firefighters still on the site, up to 200 that they can't account for yet. They were able to talk to one firefighter on the scene, though, who said that their biggest problem now is not having fire hydrants to put out these small pockets of fires that are cropping up all across the site. And secondly, Peter, there's a problem now with broken gas lines, which they fear could ignite further explosions.
George, could
Peter,
I just...
if I might add.
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
I just add one thing. I was struck by something at St. Vincent's. The Red Cross, as you may know, has put out a plea for blood donors, particularly those with the less common types of blood, such as O. But even before that plea went out, thousands of people spontaneously showed up at St. Vincent's, thousands of people, and many of them told us, this is what we think we can do to help. We can't do anything else. Sitting at home watching on television won't help, but this might.
Well, Bob, you're quite right. And in fact, there's no reason you would have heard us, but we mentioned a short while ago that blood donors in Nebraska, one of their first instincts, were people in Nebraska, one of their first instincts was to go and respond to a request for blood donations because, as you've just pointed out and we've said before, there's a critical shortage of blood in the United States. And we've heard from the Red Cross any number of times in the last year or so that the country needs blood and it's not going to be available. And so it is reassuring to hear in New York City people doing that instinctively. Bob, let me ask you both, and start with you and then George. My sense of the recovery, if that's the word for it, of this phase of what's going on down there is to deal with people who are injured, who are clearly not in or under the World Trade Towers. Am I right?
Yes, I think that's correct, and a large number of them, in one way or another, are some of the emergency and rescue people. And then the next step, as we have seen in other disasters, will be to see who else there is.
And George, we've seen buildings collapsed. It sometimes takes days to discover people under collapsed buildings, and we now have a circumstance. Do we have any idea how many people got out before the building collapsed? We don't, do we?
Not a very good idea, Peter. We do know that there was some warning. As I said earlier, we spoke to some of the security guards who were on the site, and they did have some warning. There was a feeling that the second building was going to collapse, so the evacuation did begin from people as high up as in the 82nd and 86th floors, but we don't know how many were able to get out. And we do know, Peter, from at least one of the security guards, that they were nowhere near complete. They hadn't come even close to completing the evacuation, but we don't have numbers.
And Peter, adding a little bit to the confusion, the collapse of the North Tower may have affected other buildings around there, as well as the collapse of the Millennium Hotel.
Well, thank you both very much, and both of you come back at any time that you want and can or contribute to this. We can tell you that the military. Thank you both very much, Bob Jamieson and George Stephanopoulos.
Thank you.
We can tell you that the military. The governor said earlier, the governor of New York, that the National Guard was going to come in, and there's National Guard on station in some parts of the city anyway, is setting up a temporary morgue on the piers in New York City near West 57th Street, which is where people often take off to go and have a tour of New York City from the air, and close by where the famous Circle Line leaves, so people can take a tour around the island of Manhattan and see what it looks like. And none of that traffic is permitted today. The only traffic we have seen on the Hudson River has been, as has been pointed out to us several times, John Miller particularly, pointing out that ferries are taking wounded across the river, across the Hudson River to New Jersey. ABC's Cynthia McFadden is on the phone at the moment. She is calling us from Bellevue Hospital, which is over on the east side of Manhattan, quite some distance from this. Sylvia, do you hear me? Cynthia, do you hear me?
I do, Peter.
Can you tell us what's going on there?
Yeah, we've been able to get into the Disaster Command Center, which is located here at Bellevue. As you say, it's about 20 or 30 blocks north and east of the actual site of the Twin Towers. But this is where the city puts its resources to prepare for an emergency. They rehearse here, practice here for disasters, and today we were allowed in the first group of journalists to go inside and see where they were running the disaster relief from. Let me paint a picture for you, if I might, of the room. It's about a 30 by 15 room, about 10 people crowded around a conference table, about 15 phone lines coming into the room, the mayor's office, emergency services, police and fire, all of those efforts being coordinated through this room. It was surprisingly calm, surprisingly quiet. It is located in the heart of the emergency room here at Bellevue Hospital, Peter, and the emergency room itself is busy. They've had about 140 to 150 people come through Bellevue so far. We've also had the opportunity to talk to the director of the hospital here and to the man who heads up the emergency room. I can tell you a little bit about the injuries if you'd like.
Please do.
Because this is a hospital further away, they're getting the less seriously injured, although, having said that, of the 140 or 50 people, 40 of them are classified in serious condition. 2 were dead on arrival. They have 1 baby who is being treated. 3 to 5 operating rooms are currently going with what the doctor characterized as extremely serious surgeries. The doctor running the operation here said that they have sent a team of physicians closer to the site, and they're going to be setting up tent hospitals closer to the site to help some of the enormous flow of injuries. Nobody made it here to this hospital until about 2 hours after the blast. And they believe, I've been listening to the coverage, they believe that it's not going to be for many more hours until they feel the full brunt of this over here.
Okay. Thank you, Cynthia, very much. Come back to us, please. When you get even better handle of this. We've talked a little bit about the blood shortage, which, as I said, is a national issue. But in New York City, there are supplies of blood so far. People did respond very quickly and lined up ready to give blood at some of the blood centers here. There is a supply of O-type blood. O negative appears, as best we can understand from the people who are collecting it, is the most important kind of blood needed at the moment because it's the universal donor, meaning anyone can actually get it. Now, there's a slight bit more of information, like all information today, reasonably suspect at the outset, but the Associated Press is reporting that this airliner, this United Airlines jet, which crashed in Pennsylvania, which is a American Airlines, my apologies, United Airlines Flight 93. I don't quite know exactly what aircraft it was, a 767, I think, which we assessed uncertain about, did not know why it had crashed, whether it was part of this overall operation this morning. The AP is now quoting a man who minutes earlier, saying he was a passenger on the plane, told an emergency dispatcher in a cell phone call that we are being hijacked. We are being hijacked. Treat that, as you do all the information we give you today, as being preliminary at best, sometimes wrong. I think we've been pretty good about it today, and certainly confused, because listening to the mayor, listening to the governor of the state, both of whom we talked to, listening to the senator in charge of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, listening to all of our analysts, listening to everybody, the country is still very much in the middle of, if not immediate post-event chaos, certainly in terms of trauma, and trying to get a handle on what the hell's been going on here. And as we've said before, when you look at the television pictures of the Trade Center collapsed upon itself, these are buildings 110 stories high, and where thousands and thousands and thousands of people work. And I know on occasion we can run the images of it to the point of offensiveness. I hope we're not there. But this is what it looked like when one of the trade towers just appeared to either peel away or collapse on itself, but from top to bottom, 110 stories to the bottom. First one, the southern tower, Tower 1 or Tower 2, it doesn't matter what, just one tower and then the other. And then the other tower sometime later, which John Miller said the cops picked up very quickly, was looking weak and bending or leaning in one particular direction, indicating that when those two aircraft, one hitting one tower, the other hitting another, had gone straight into those towers with such force that even at the midpoint of the building, or in that case 2/3 up, something had happened to so totally weaken the infrastructure that this was like peeling a banana, except that it was full of people, or had many, many people in it. I think we have Senator John McCain on the phone from Washington. Am I right, Senator?
Yes, Peter, how are you?
I'm well, sir, thank you. I'm not well. None of us are well. You know that.
Yes.
What's on your mind?
Well, I think that this act obviously is one which would constitute an act of war. I believe that the American people should remain calm and rally behind our president, and I'm confident that our military and our president will find out the perpetrators of this outrage, and we will not only punish those responsible, but ensure that something like this never happens again. And clearly we need to look at our intelligence capabilities.
I don't mean for one second, Senator, to belittle the necessary thing you must say today, which is we'll find those who are responsible and we'll punish them, because Tony Cordesman has just pointed out very effectively how often we don't find the people and we don't get to punish them. But you say it an act of war.
Yes.
Do you believe that if another country is somehow the patron of an individual or a group of individuals who has done this, we should go to war with that country?
Absolutely, because they have committed atrocity on a scale that's unprecedented in history that I know of. Everybody's talking about a second Pearl Harbor. At least that was an attack on military targets, not on the civilian community. This is an unspeakable outrage, and clearly we can and must find out who perpetrated it. And Tony Cordesman and I have great respect for him, but I believe that we have the capability to find it out, and we need to improve our intelligence capabilities, particularly in the area of human intelligence. We have wonderful satellite capabilities and technical capabilities. In the late 70s and early 80s, we, for all intents and purposes, dismantled our human intelligence capability, which divines motives, and that's something technical intelligence cannot do.
Well, I think those of us who cover intelligence in any way, Senator, know that human intelligence, or HUMINT as they call it in the trade, has been very difficult, particularly in places like Afghanistan. So just assume for a second, well, no, don't assume anything, but are you desperately frustrated at the moment in some respects because this was sort of, in many ways, this was bound to happen in some measure, and we may not be able to get at the perpetrators?
No, I think that among many other things, obviously sorrow is the overriding emotion, but also I don't think our lives will ever be the same again in some respect, especially those who use airliners with some frequency. There's always been questions and studies and tests of our airport security systems, and they've always found breaches in them. Obviously, that's going to have to be addressed, and that's going to be very inconvenient for Americans. But at the same time, we also have to reevaluate the importance of making sure that anyone who wants to try it is incapable of doing so. But the best way to address it, obviously, is going to the source.
Your Democratic colleague, Senator Biden, said a while ago, the terrorist wins again when it alters American lifestyle. I assume you believe the same thing?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And the things that have been inflicted on the American people is, it staggers the imagination. And yet I believe that the best thing that we can do as Americans is remain calm, rally behind the President of the United States, and know with confidence that we will take whatever steps are necessary to prevent this from happening again. I don't think that there's any reason for Americans to feel a sense of panic.
Okay. Thank you, Senator McCain, very much indeed. Appreciate your time. Senator John McCain of Arizona, who knows a lot about violence, and many people in the country will think knows a lot about leadership as well. Former presidential candidate, often talking about doing it, or often considered to be doing it again. Claire Shipman is in Washington. Claire, where's Mr. Bush?
Well, Peter, we have a little bit of news on that front. As you know, he is in the air again on his way somewhere from Shreveport, Louisiana. We have been told by sources that he will not be coming to Washington. He is going to make another stop at an undisclosed secure location so that he can talk to people from there on the ground. His security team can assess just how safe it is back here in Washington. As you mentioned earlier, that there must be great political pressure for him to get back to Washington. These sources confirm just that. The political team wants him back home. He wants to come back home. His security team does not feel it is safe right now. They do think, though, and they're guessing right now, that he might be able to get back at some point this evening. But again, he's got at least one more stop. Another interesting point along those lines.
Hold on. One more stop?
One more stop between Shreveport and Washington. He's on his way now, we're told, to another undisclosed location that his security team considers secure. They won't tell us where it is, obviously.
But do we know? So, in other words, this one more stop is another security stop dictated by the Secret Service?
Indeed it is. And we would be guessing if we talked about another Air Force base or something of the kind, but they have a number of stops. And I'm told this one is not anywhere in the direction of Washington, that they have a number of places they can take him.
Let me ask you this. Have you heard any mention whatsoever of the possibility the President will come to New York?
No, there was a rumor to that effect earlier, Peter, but that was shot down, and my sources tell me he is not going anywhere near New York right now. That situation would create chaos that New York just doesn't need at this point.
Absolutely.
They've also told us that their full security plan is in effect. They do have the House and Senate leadership out of town. Condoleezza Rice is the only senior official remaining at the White House, and she will remain at the White House to try to coordinate efforts from there. Mrs. Bush has also been spirited away. She was on Capitol Hill this morning set to address Congress. She's been taken to an undisclosed location. Peter.
Now, there was some mention that there was some mention of the fact that the United Airlines aircraft that crashed east to southeast of Pittsburgh may have been, in fact, going in the direction of Camp David. Had you heard that?
I heard that, as you did. My security sources don't know anything about that,
okay.
So we haven't been able to confirm anything along those lines.
Then we'll leave it alone. Claire, thanks very much. We'll come back to you as soon as we know where the President is going to go next. It seems a little bit strange. Pierre Thomas, working the phones on the FBI. What have you got, Pierre?
Well, one of the first things that they are focused on, obviously, is the injured, but the next priority is to get to Dulles International Airport, which they are, and Boston Logan. They are going to talk to the Boston United and American airline officials. They're trying to get a sense of who was on the plane. Early on, they're very limited in what they can do. They're trying to assess the situation, but one of the first things they can try to do is try to get a sense of who was on the plane, try to begin to check out aliases, and that might lead them in some investigative direction. But they're very limited in the early stages in terms of what they can do.
Exactly. Many thanks. And as you and John Miller have reminded us several times today, we're covering a tragedy and we are covering a crime. And so the FBI is now beginning to get things together in terms of trying to piece together the elements of crime. The only thing you get out of the airplane, one assumes at this point, is a long time from now, evidence of explosives on board that were not the gas tanks, the black boxes, which survive pretty much anything. I think it is our experience. And in terms of trying to chase down the human beings, going to those two airports to see who got on board, checking the passenger list.
Absolutely. Things that they can't get at right now. They can't do very much investigative work at the scenes. Right. So where they go is where the plane took off from. Talk to those officials. One official told me, quote, "We're trying to talk to any and everyone who touched that plane, from maintenance workers to the people who ticketed the persons getting on the plane."
Great. Thanks, Pierre. Keep at it. By the way, the Federal Aviation Administration says that the earliest that they will allow flights to resume, this may change, will be noon tomorrow. More than 24 hours after they first ordered all aircraft not to take off and then all aircraft to land as soon as possible. And I think that all domestic U.S. flights are now currently on the ground. Some international flights coming from overseas are still on their way to West Coast airports and still in the air. But what is quite staggering here in a way is the FAA says they will only allow flights to resume at noon tomorrow. We're talking, if you add it up, about approximately somewhere in the neighborhood of 36,000 flights back and forth and up and down and all the interim places across the United States. We all know, those of us who travel by air on a regular basis, exactly how difficult air travel is and how much of it there is at the moment. But there's a outstanding example of what it means to put out an order like that. 36,000 flights going to be halted. In fact, I think Charlie Gibson, my colleague who was here when this happened this morning, has been looking particularly at this dimension of it. Charlie?
Well, Peter, I just found a note that all U.S. commercial aircraft, I wasn't absolutely certain what you said a moment ago, but that all U.S. commercial aircraft that were not involved in hijackings today, obviously, but we know what's happened to those planes that were hijacked, but all U.S. commercial aircraft have landed, and as you mentioned, there will be no flights resumed until noon tomorrow. A couple of just incidental events. Prince Andrew of England was headed for Atlanta when all of this happened. His plane turned around. King Abdullah of Jordan was also headed for the United States. And we now read that flights, Tony Blair, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, has canceled all flights over London because of concern of air security over that city. There are a number of other things going on. Some of these pale in significance to what's happening in New York and Washington, but we want to bring them to you anyway. And I'm going to give you some details of what are happening in various states around the country. Much of this redundant to some things Peter had said, some of it new information. This Sunday's Emmys Awards ceremonies in Los Angeles has been postponed because of today's terrorist attacks on the East Coast. The head of the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences says he's not going to set a new date for the ceremony until the national mourning that is going to take place is over. There were Latin Grammy Awards scheduled for tonight in Los Angeles. Those have been canceled. In the sports world, as we mentioned a while ago, and there's some other cancellations as well, the 15 baseball games have now been canceled around the country that were to be played in the major leagues tonight. The minor leagues postponed all of their playoff games. Their regular seasons are over, but the playoff games in the minor leagues have been canceled. The commissioner of baseball said in the interest of security and out of sense of deep mourning for the national tragedy that has occurred today, all Major League Baseball games for today have been canceled. The PGA Tour has canceled the beginning of tournaments on Thursday, and whether they will be further delayed is uncertain. Major League Soccer postponed all of the games it had scheduled for tomorrow night, and the National Football League says it is mulling over whether to postpone this weekend's schedule. Obviously, the effects of this are going to reverberate for many days, many weeks, many months.
Yep.
And so there are those kinds of cancellations being discussed.
Okay, thanks, Charlie.
Go ahead.
Thanks. I just, as we want to go to try to bring it back together for people who, a lot of people have been not with us all day. The thousands of millions of people may have been glued to their televisions, impossible not to. But ABC's John Donovan has been following the events of the last few hours, and he has managed to put together, I suppose we could call it a chronology or a timeline, if you will. But here is some sense of what happened from the beginning.
We want to tell you what we know as we know it, but we just got a report in that there's been some sort of explosion at
the first thing any television camera saw this morning was this. Just before 9 o'clock, roughly 15 minutes earlier, an American Airlines jet hijacked from Boston had crashed into the South Tower of the World Trade Center. There were 92 people on board.
It does not appear that there's any kind of an effort up there yet. Now remember, oh my God.
That looks like a second plane.
I did not see a plane go in.
Minutes later, the second plane, the second tower. The fireball ate up the aircraft. It was a United Airlines flight, a 767 from Boston to Los Angeles. There had been 65 people on board.
Some sort of a concerted.
I was happening to look on the first tower, and I actually saw people waving where the first plane crashed through, and then it was unbelievable seeing this second jet come crashing into the second tower. What is going on?
New York City was staggered.
As soon as he got hit, I was thrown to a window. So I was very lucky.
We're going to interrupt this. We'll come back to this, I promise you, to go to a news conference being held by the Mayor of New York, Rudolph Giuliani.
And then, Governor, thank you very much for your assistance and your help and your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, for your leadership through this crisis. This is a vicious attack upon New York. It's an attack upon America. It's an attack upon the whole concept of freedom and our way of life. And we cannot let these attacks succeed. The first step has to be to make sure we do everything in our power to protect the people and to save the lives of those whose lives are still at risk and to help those who have been injured. And I want to commend the mayor, and I want to thank my colleagues from Connecticut, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and the federal government have all offered and made ready support to help us deal with this ongoing crisis. The people of New York are not only the freest and most diverse people in the world, we're also, I believe, the most capable of rising to meet the challenges of this type of attack. And right now, we want New Yorkers to remain calm, to go about their business, to appreciate the fact that everything to provide for their safety is being done, to appreciate that everything that can be done to provide for the health and the needs of the people who are still at risk is being done, and that we will continue to work to make sure that we get through this as strongly and quickly as possible. I want to thank the federal administration. Secretary Thompson has been on the phone with me a number of times, as well as the president, for what they are offering and prepared to do. And we're just confident that, well, this is a horrible attack and one that is despicable and really unthinkable in its magnitude. We will get through this, and we will continue to have a great and free country, state, and society.
Do we know the number of casualties at this point, sir?
I don't think we really want to speculate about that. The number of casualties will be more than any of us can bear ultimately. And I don't think we want to speculate on the number of casualties. The effort now has to be to save as many people as possible. And I don't think we will know the answer to that until sometime tomorrow or the next day.
Were there large numbers of firefighters?
There are a large number of firefighters and police officers who are in harm's way. And we don't know how many we've lost. But there's no doubt we've lost some firefighters and police officers.
Do you know anything about the cause of the explosions that brought the two buildings down yet? Was it caused by the planes or by something else?
We
There were second explosions?
we believe that it was caused by the after effects of the planes hitting the buildings. We don't know of an additional explosion after that.
Mayor, could you tell us, do you expect any further attacks on New York? Is there anything to indicate that there could be more bombs, more planes out there? I know originally there was a report that 8 planes had been hijacked, 4 have only been accounted for. What about the remaining 4? And is there any possibility that there could be bombs on the ground planted by...
We have no specific information to that effect. Obviously, the city is now closed. The airspace around the city is closed. And we are on heightened alert. But we have no specific information suggesting any further attack.
Mr. Mayor, why are 2 major warships coming into the port of New York right
I think
now?
to give the people of New York confidence, to show that the federal government is standing with us, and to just to make certain that nothing further happens. This has been a very, very difficult and traumatic day for the people of the United States and the people of the city. And I think that it's an act that shows that the federal government is going to do everything they can to support us and help us.
Can you give us an idea of the extent of the rescue effort that's going on right now in Lower Manhattan? What the scope of this operation?
There are over 1,000 rescue workers, probably about 2,000 that are deployed, trying to get into the buildings, trying to find people, trying to search for people. The governor and I spoke a couple of hours ago, and the governor has deployed the National Guard to relieve them because our people are going to need reinforcements pretty soon. But right now they don't want to leave because they're searching for innocent citizens, and they're searching for some of their brothers and sisters.
Are you finding survivors?
Yes, we have some numbers that we can give you. We have 1,500 people at Liberty State Park who were evacuated, described as walking wounded. They were evacuated by ferry and other means. There are about 600 as of about 15 minutes ago in local hospitals that we account for. 600 people that are being treated in local hospitals. And there are 150 in particular that were critical, that were moved by EMS. New York City has 170 hospitals. So we have a lot of hospitals, and we're utilizing all of them. Probably the one that was the hardest hit was St. Vincent's Hospital. And I would like to just single them out and commend them, because as I was rushing down there, after the first plane hit, and before the second, they were already deploying people on the street. I could see the doctors and nurses outside getting ready to receive people. And that was before the second plane actually hit the World Trade Center.
What was your experience down there?
Also blood donations. We have several sites for blood donations. 153 East 53rd Street, 66 in Amsterdam, which is the Red Cross, and 310 East 67th Street. If people want to do something and they can donate blood, that's going to help not just today, but tomorrow and the next day. This relief effort is going to take some time.
Mr. Mayor, you were one of the first people down there. Can you describe the scene in your own words, what you saw down there?
I don't know that I'm really able to describe it. It was the most horrific scene I've ever seen in my whole life. We saw the World Trade Center in flames, a big gaping hole all the way on the top of it. We could see people jumping from the top of the building. And then we went into Barclay Street, 75 Barclay Street, I think it was, and we were there when the building collapsed, and it collapsed in part on 75 Barclay Street. So we were trapped in the building for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, trying to get out different exits. And we finally went through a basement and came out 100 Park Place.
Did you ever fear for your own safety, sir?
Sure, yeah.
What went through your mind?
I don't think anything went through my mind other than making sure that we all remained calm and found an exit and just tried to figure out the most intelligent thing to do. Probably the same thing that went through the minds of 10,000 other New Yorkers who I could see on the streets, and I really have to commend them. If you really want to know what New Yorkers are all about, you just watch the way in which they handle themselves. They didn't panic. They moved deliberately. They moved swiftly. But they didn't hurt each other. They helped each other. I mean, these are just the most wonderful people in the world.
Do we know anything about the composition of that dust that blankets Lower Manhattan? Is there any asbestos or any hazardous material in that dust?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Mr. Mayor, there were reports of a gas explosion related to this. Are you aware of that? There was a gas leak or possible explosion?
We don't believe it. We don't believe that's the case.
Mr. Mayor, can you tell us anything about where the planes come from, where the aircraft came from?
Bill Diamond reminds me that we've turned off the gas in the city buildings, just to be certain.
Can you tell us
as a precaution
about where these aircraft came from? There was a report that may have been hijacked in Boston.
I think we should leave that up to the federal government to yes, we do have some information, but I think we should leave that up to the federal government to release that information. focus is on the relief efforts. And
Governor, do you
What about security for the
think there should be on the part of the United States for what happened here in this country, both in New York, Washington, and other places?
First step right now, Marcia, is to make sure we do everything to help those people who need our support, and whether they're injured or still trapped in buildings. The second thing is to make sure at the same time we're providing the maximum security against possible additional incidents. But clearly, this is an attack upon America. It's an attack upon our freedom and our way of life, and we must retaliate and go after those who perpetuated this heinous crime against the people of America.
Mayor, this is compared to Pearl Harbor. Do you consider this to be an act of war? This has been compared.
I'll do both. I'll do
both. This has been compared to Pearl Harbor. Do you consider this to
This
be
is
an act of war?
this is a vicious, unprovoked, horrible attack on innocent men, women, and children. It's one of the most heinous acts, certainly in world history.